I thank you so much for really diving into these humanising bios. I know that it's been a bit of a journey for me just to be comfortable kind of really showing who I am in such a short bio rather than a stack of achievements. And I feel like the humanising element of presenting ourselves with the bios that show our essence is part of like the bigger picture of seeing the people for people rather than what they're presenting for, what they need care for, all of that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why this panel is so important. I mean, centering the voice and touching on the bios again, like that feels so personal. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like those bios really center the person rather than, oh, I've graduated from here, these are my achievements, which are all amazing things, but keeping the essence and remembering that humans are humans really helps us change our perspective when interacting with people that need help, and we see them for who they are, not for all of these things that you read or presentations. But the impact of centering the voice and centering the person, it shows them respect. It actually acknowledges that they are human. More often than not, when people go through the system, they are seen so many times, you know, the amount of intakes, the amount of storytelling, the amount of kind of like data mining almost of like what their issues are is so, it is dehumanizing and it's very heavy. So the acknowledgement of the acknowledgement that a person feels when they are seen is just transformational, because that's what sparks hope. And it's life-changing and it's meaningful, and sometimes it's the first time anyone in their life has acknowledged them and seen them. And that is huge. It might be a Tuesday for you, but it's a catalyst for the rest of their life for them. The entrenchment in the system and being unheard is so detrimental, but the opportunity to transform by elevating the voices of these people, by centering them, I think that's where the gold is, to be honest. And genuine help should always come with compassion and visibility of the person. Because I think a big part of being human is the compassion, is the care for one another. Anyway, that's me being a little bit deep. We'll go into questions. So Tara, what did you have that supported you to have your own voice heard in recovery, and what could practitioners do to enable that in more women who don't have a voice in their care?
Yeah. Is that one? It's such a big question. I feel like you only have so much to say. You've got to like pick one thread. So
pick your favourite.
I came from what you would typically say is a group home resi kid, except for I was never at the resi. I was staying with an older male. The last two presentations actually were really fantastic they just explained my life pretty much. So it was really good, really great research. And building on that research, one of the things that really helped me find recovery or finding my voice, and as somebody else pointed out, this idea of voice, like what does that mean? And for me, it means power. To name, you know, if anyone's a fan of Exorcist movies, I don't know if you are, you know, when like you find out the name of the demon and then you can cast him out, you know, and I find that similar when we're trying to navigate services. We need to know the names of things. We can't just kind of vaguely point at something and go, I don't like that. Like, that's not working. But if we know the names of things and we understand the concepts behind what is challenging us, we can understand how to move forward. And one of the things that I remember writing down was to remember it's not giving voice to the voiceless, it's understanding that they already have a voice, and to look at what is inhibiting that voice, what systemic issues are in the way of them speaking. So I had a fantastic youth worker from YSAS. I don't know if there's any YSAS people here, but you're fantastic, like you. And he was, you know, that compassionate adult, if you think about schema therapy, just always there with, was it like unregarded compassion or something? I can't remember the word. But no matter what, you know, so I'd be back and forth from, you know, this abusive, like, drug dealer place where I lived, and he'd be organising me places to go. And there wasn't much as a young person for intimate, I would hesitate to call it, like family violence, intimate partner family violence. There wasn't really many supports, so to speak, for me to transition to. So whenever I would go back, he was always there with just compassion, just acceptance, and just like, oh, you know, what do we want to do now? And what was really vital to my recovery was in my 20s, actually, he put my name up to Catherine Daly, who's a researcher who worked with YSAS, and she does the youth work RMIT course. It's one of the biggest youth work courses in Australia. And she did some research into young people accessing services. And the results that she found echoed my story perfectly. And she came to, my name was put forward to do a case study alongside hers. And when I found out that my story wasn't uncommon, and when I was given all the words to name what happened to me, to name my story, and to see that this is happening on a grand scale, I was able to say, and it was during the Me Too era, I was able to go to the police, tell them what this man had done to me for 10 years, and take him to court, and then from there springboard my voice through to ABC, SBS, going through academia and university. So giving voice is giving power, really. And in order to give power, you need to break down what systems you're using working with the client. What are these systems? What are their names? What is that happening? Rather than making the decision, you know, writing a case and making decisions for them and giving them half the information. Giving them all that information enables them to have a voice and them to exercise their own voice. So, sorry, that's my little rant.
No, that's all right. That was really lovely. And I like what you're saying about being able to, like, not having words for a thing. I call it, like, you can't solve a problem that you can't name. You can throw line stabs in the dark, but you can't fix a problem if you don't know what it is. And, you know, I like to call them unidentified voids. When we have, like, we know there's something, that there's an issue, but you can't really articulate it. You don't really know what it is. It's just something somewhere that's not quite right, unidentified void. But when you can find it, then it's like you can name it, you can address it, and you're right, it does feel like this power, and you find your voice because you can actually see that part of yourself and you can articulate that void.
Exactly.
Yeah. I might throw over to Michelle. So what practice principles should we embed with women to assist them finding their voice?
Well, very good question. So a lot of this has been mentioned already today, and a bit later on Jen and I are going to go into more detail about it. The word trauma-informed, or words, trauma-informed care is bandied around a lot, but what that actually means might be different in practice. One thing we need to be aware of as clinicians is cognitive bias and assumptions we make about people who present to our services, and just the ability to be able to listen, to make sure people are understood, not just to do your intake form or check off your screening tools and that sort of thing. It's to actually listen and make sure they're understood, and give them that power to have choice as well in their treatment. So engaging people, creating a connection at the front end to make sure we can have a continuum of care as well and across the treatment journey, whatever that looks like for the individual. Something that's more recent in our sector is the peer workforce. I know mental health, we've had it around for a long time, but in the alcohol and other drug sector, particularly in New South Wales, where Jen and I are from, we've just sort of introducing that and trying to embed peer workforce into services, particularly residential services, to support people coming in to enable that voice more further, and particularly for women. We have a few services particularly for women in New South Wales, and that's a good start, but there does need to be more of them, and particularly for women with children who often struggle to access services, but also, as was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of stigma around parenting and women with children accessing treatment services across the board. So that's an area that needs further development in that space as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to dig a little deeper into the way that you, like, how do you make a client feel heard and understood? And like, from my experience, and I've heard a lot of stories from others as well, because of distrust in the system, it can take a while for safety, or for a safe space to be built. So do you have any strategies to mitigate that hesitancy to want to be able to engage so that they can feel heard and understood?
Yeah, because as you say, there is a lot of mistrust, or people's trust has been broken in the past from accessing particular services. It might be emergency departments or all sorts of other services where something might not have gone too well for them. So creating a space of safety, both physical and psychological safety, is really important, not just for the clients or consumers, but also for your workforce. That's and a sense of belonging. So how you do that is quite not easy for each individual, because you've got to also meet people where they're at and make sure that you create that connection initially so that they're going to feel safe. You're transparent, you're communicating openly and making things clear about what the processes are, why you need information from them, those sorts of things as well. What you're going to do with that information as well, like how it's going to be used.
That is, honestly, it is the way, in my experience, that has been the thing that has made me be able to trust services, the transparency, and you're right on the ball. When you keep your client informed, especially if they're vulnerable, they're distrustful because people will give them false hope or tell them information that's incorrect because they want to, I don't know, maybe they want to make them feel better, but ultimately it's not the right way to create that safe space, and that honesty going both ways is actually so important. And that does centre the voice, because when you've got all the information, you can make complete decisions you can make the right decisions for yourself. And if you're a mother, you can do that with, you can make those decisions with your children in mind, knowing what's going to happen if you do A, B, or C. But you have all the information, and that is such a, it's like calming almost. It does provide that sense of, I feel comfort because I know enough facts, I know enough of what's going to happen if I go through either of these doors. Thank you for sharing that. Jen, well, firstly, I wanted to know, do you have anything to add on how you create safety, or like what you see as safety in this kind of context?
So I think what stood out for me is pretty much every presentation or speaker today has made the recognition of living and lived experience, and I think that acknowledgement and putting that out there definitely makes a sense of safety for people. Like I guess, so my role as consumer engagement coordinator at NADA, and you know, that's an identified position, and I think like valuing that lived and lived experience so much to identify it, same with key workers like Michelle was talking about before, you know, creates a sense of safety for clients as well when you can recognise that, hey, even at an organisational level, like, you know, that experience is valued. Yeah.
So with your role being consumer participation, how do you and how should we enable more women to participate in advocacy for policy, program reform, you know, to be involved, to really have their voices in the spaces that they need to be heard?
Yeah, I just want to recognise as well that consumer for a lot of people isn't the most favoured word, so I apologise for that as well. But I think, so events like this are so important, and then it's what we do from here when we go back to the services that we work at or the people that we work with, and really kind of implement things that are going to support people. A couple of things that we do, so we have, like, I would say top tier would be like a consumer advisory group. So NADA has a consumer advisory group, which we, you know, have 8 people with diverse experiences of living lived experiences. They kind of inform what we do, like, so what we advocate for, what kind of things that we're kind of working on. And part of my role is to support services to set up their own consumer advisory groups. We have a consumer participation audit tool, which is on the NADA website, free to access if anyone's interested. And you can take that and kind of gauge where your service is at in incorporating voices of lived experience in your service delivery. Like one key thing that kind of comes out is people will say, oh, we've got a suggestion box. And it's like, okay, so what do you do with the suggestions in the suggestion box? You know, the best thing would be you go through it with the people, and then there's a co-design process with the people to, you know, see that come together and see that happen, or why it can't happen. Is that constant feedback loop?
Yeah, the closing the loop.
100%
Yeah.
has to happen, otherwise it's tokenistic.
I definitely understand that. Can you give me maybe a bit of a more specific example of something that you guys have done from, like, something you have achieved from your consumer participation that was something that you previously probably wouldn't have? Sorry, I know that's a bit on the spot. Yeah.
Thank you. So currently at the moment, New South Wales Health, the Ministry of Health Centre for Alcohol and Other Drugs, NUA, which is the peer-led organisation in New South Wales, and NADA have collaborated on a stigma and discrimination charter, which is going to be implemented into all New South Wales Health kind of program.
That is huge.
It's massive, and it was a really great thing to be a part of. It was a co-design process with consumers, clinicians from where are they from?
ED,
mental
maternity.
health, maternity. You know,
So everywhere.
It was fantastic. And it was really good, and it's pretty much finalised, and I thought it was great. I don't know if you want to add anything on that one.
Yeah, just that the whole co-design process was really good and effective. So we had 10 consumers in the process and 7 clinicians. So our clinicians were from EDs, mental health and maternity units across New South Wales. So we had a good spread of regional and metro services involved, which was really good. And we had a number of workshops which Jen and I were involved in over the last few months, and then now the charter's about to be finalised. So it's actually being presented as a poster at APSAD if anyone's going. But it was a really good process, so it's going to be distributed everywhere not just to health services, but to NGOs, and anyone can use it. So it's a nice poster that's like, so it's very visual, it's got some picture, and plus it's very descriptive, so it's got voices of people describing how certain things that clinicians will say make them feel. So it's a good thing to stick up on the wall.
That sounds amazing. And from everything just in this little chat, you know, it's centering the voice, you know, that unidentified void. You can get more people naming the thing, the more information you can get out there. And you've got co-design, like a co-design, was it a charter?
Yeah.
That's huge. That is a really high level thing, but then it's like that trickles down. And with those practical, you know, creating safety, which does take time, and understanding that people are distrustful of the system. But that's what we can do. Like, that is the bigger picture. You know, consumers, or clients, consumers, people who have been through the system need their voices heard. And if I'm sitting here and thinking, oh my God, a charter, that is such an achievement for the movement. And it was a collaborative effort, which is really, it's really great to see, because a lot of other sectors struggle to do collaboration right. Tara, I was wondering if you had any kind of final comments on this, like what would what does having a charter or something like that, or having been involved in the making of that, what kind of meaning does that have in empowering you?
I think that that's fantastic that you've done that, because at the end of the day, the services that consumers are using, annoying.
Yeah.
they're so I, am both a service provider and a service user. So they're our services, they're our resources, it's our power. And so from not coming from a top-down perspective and coming from that bottom-up perspective, you're more acknowledging that those services are by the, nothing about us without us, from by the consumer, for the consumer, of the consumer. And then that then enables voice and it enables power. And it stops, and it can help with so many of the things that we've heard here today, the stigmatising, the labelling, the boxing of people. It's unfortunate that even in my job as a living experience worker, as a youth worker, we're still getting people using terms like, oh, she's got borderline, so she's not going to respond to this and that. It's really difficult. It's difficult, and you've got to, and when people make those comments, it's also like, do you understand that there are people that are working with you that have lived experience as well? And so by doing this, we want our services to be intertwined with the consumer. So I just hate, even using the word, it's one thing, and we're all part of that. By doing the charter, by involving the consumer, we need a new word. Someone needs to come up with
People.
That'd be great. People of the services, we're recognising that that's their power, that's their voices, and that's, as I said with my recovery, key component of that was naming it, understanding it, and justice was weaving me back into community, into the fabric of community, and feeling like I had rights, I was important, I mattered, I had a voice, and I wasn't just this thing being rated on and being buffeted around. And I think that's really, it's really fantastic.
Yeah.
Learn something. I just wanted to say as well, what's so important is when you're putting people in these positions where they're going to be sharing, is building the capacity of the people that are in those positions, either through trainings or just fully everything laid out on the table. Events like this, it's about saying, this is going to be recorded and it's going to be online. I don't know if you're going to be able to get it down if you change your mind about being put out there like that. Things like that is so important, and we also really strongly believe in paying people for their time and their expertise. And we don't believe, I don't believe in gift vouchers unless it's requested, because that person is needs to be in a gift voucher. Especially when you're considering women, and the experiences that's been spoken about, you do need to consider people need to be paid. It needs to, otherwise it's not practical. You're not going to get those voices.
Yeah, and it's also that, it is also valuing them and their experiences, because involving people who have used services, women that have used services, who have gone through, honestly, a really crap time, we can't just mine them for their expertise. It does have to be respected as work, and to provide that choice of how they want to receive payment for that, the consultancy, their expertise, it's the least we could do. It's respectful. But I guess kind of pulling back to centering women's voice in AOD at a kind of lower level, creating the safety enables that transparency. And when you have that trust with a client, so many things can happen. That confidence, it is life-changing. I know it was for me. And I mean, honestly, I don't know why we don't just operate like that, but the world is what it is. And we've got to work with what we've got. I'm also not sure how we're doing for time, because I have no idea who's the timekeeper. Oh, 1 minute. It's amazing. I don't really know if I have anything else to say. 1 minute. Anyone else want to take? No?
I don't know if I could do 1 minute without.
No. Well, I guess I'll just finish up with a very little call to action. Go out, go forth and treat people, see people for humans. Remember, everyone is human. We all have good days, we all have shit days, and I feel like everyone is always one just really catastrophic life disaster away from being on the other end of things. And I guess remembering that and keeping that at the front of mind everywhere you go, I think that's how we actually build a more compassionate world overall. Sorry, I'm a big scale thinker.
I just have one thing to add that I just remembered. Sorry, just rewinding. You wouldn't pay your own workers with vouchers. So I just want to remind people to treat consumers as equal. They're the same. We're exactly the same. We should be treated exactly the same. We bring the same experience, and sometimes more, and so we should be paid. Imagine if your boss was like, here's a voucher for your work. It's so degrading, really.
And technically against the law.
Yeah. So, and as you were saying, I think it adds to that too. Compassionate and treating us and people like equals really should be the take-home message. Sharing power.
I'm happy to finish on that. So thank you. Thank you. I know that was a bit off the cuff.